A lot of people that I talk to, a lot of investors, a lot of American people are very worried about what's going to happen next. What do you think, Professor Blinder? What do you think is going to happen next, and should they be worried?
The can was kicked down the road, but I think half the people that kicked it down the road saw that they took a lot of damage in this last episode, and I think it's a reasonable bet that they won't do it again.
The consensus that I hear from economists is one that says, why are we worried about the deficit right now? And I'm not saying the deficit's not a problem, but if ever there was an example of the cure being worse than the illness, I think that's true at this moment right now.
Some of the deleveraging that has happened post-crisis was very healthy, but if it goes too far, people are holding back on especially discretionary expenditures. And so I think that's some of what we're seeing is spending is growing, but at a much slower rate than one would expect at this point post-recovery.
And Alan, you wrote an article for an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal in July saying that Janet Yellen was the best choice for the job. Why did you say she was the best choice? And then, Steve, I'd like you to chime in as well.
I think the way you should think of the handoff from Ben Bernanke to Janet Yellen as one of 80 to 90% continuity and maybe 10 to 20% change. You don't want a new sheriff showing up in town, shooting the guns and saying now everything has changed. You're not going to get that clearly from Janet Yellen.
I think the central question of central banking over the next 3 years is what I think economists call the Odysseus test, which is to lash themselves to the mast and to make sure their crew does not untie the ropes as they near the sirens. I think they failed this test in June, in my opinion. I have a sense that Janet is not going to fail the Odysseus test.
I want to ask you, since we are here tonight for talking about the mission of economic and financial literacy, a little bit about how you would solve this problem.
I think we owe it to our society to make it mandatory everywhere in the country. And I think
What can we expect, what can we hope to get in terms of improving, not just for young people, K through 12, but in terms of improving financial and economic literacy?
I can't think of really anything almost as practical as some basic financial literacy, because after high school, they're immediately going to be making important decisions.
I think there's a tendency to undersell the ability of kids to get this stuff, in part because we don't work hard enough at explaining it to them.
Members of Congress can get away with spouting the kind of nonsense about economics that they could never get away with on physics, geography, arithmetic, and so on. A senator that consistently was saying Mexico's to our north and Canada's to our south would be held to account and look like a jerk. And they don't do that, of course. But equivalent things in economics just go out and unchallenged.
It's not good for economic policy, and that's why Council for Economic Education is here, to make some changes and make sure that we do have, I hope, David, to your point, it as a national mandate that students have economic and personal finance education in their schools. Thank you all for joining us for the Fireside Chat.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.